couple of weeks ago, I was sitting on a panel with Duane Highley, who is the CEO of the Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association, serves 4 states in the U.S. And he made a statement that caught my attention. Their organization is looking at 70% renewables by 2030, 50% by 2024. And I'm very curious about how they intend to do that. So welcome to the interview, Duane.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
Now, you represent 42 utilities in Wyoming, New Mexico, Colorado, and Nebraska. California gets all the attention for its attempt to rapidly switch over to renewables, but it sounds to me like you're ahead of them.
Well, we don't mind for California to make all the mistakes, but we intend to do it the right way.
What is the right way? How are you intending to do this?
Well, so we're a member-owned cooperative wholesale power supplier. We're actually owned by 42 utility members. Each of them is a member-owned public power system, nonprofit all the way down the value chain. And so we do what our members want. And what our members want is reliable and affordable power while making a green energy transition. So that's been our focus, kind of a unique cooperative business model method to take a look at this in a way that all of our members can support.
Okay, so you're completing a number of wind projects. By 2024, you're getting into some solar and battery storage. A lot of battery storage. I think with 4,000 megawatts by 2030.
No, I think more like 300.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, but we can go through the numbers on this on the supply portfolio if we'd like.
If you wouldn't mind, please.
Yeah, so Tri-State's about a 3,000 megawatt utility, so that those 42 members serve across 200,000 square miles. It makes us one of the biggest utilities in the country in terms of square miles, but not the biggest in terms of load. And we serve about 1 million, 1.2 million ultimate consumers. And so that 3,000 megawatts of electrical load is served through a mix of resources: coal, oil, gas, biomass, hydroelectric, wind, solar, and we bring it all together as the power supplier for these entities. So if you look at where we are today, we're over a third renewable already. By 2024, we'll be 50% clean energy delivered to our members. And by the end of the decade, 70% clean energy delivered to our members. And we're doing that with the addition of thousands of megawatts of new wind and solar. So currently we have 1,000 under development that'll be completed by 2024. That gets us to that 50% clean energy, along with the almost 1,000 that we'd already had. So think about almost 2,000 megawatts of capacity on a 3,000 megawatt system. Then between 2024 and 2030, we're going to add another 2,000 megawatts of wind and solar. So think 4,000 megawatts of clean energy on a 3,000 megawatt system.
Right. And so how do you keep all that balance? How is it storage? Is it trading with your neighbors? How do you work that?
So in the plan that we've just filed and had approved at the Colorado PUC, it does include some storage, about 300 megawatts of battery storage. It also includes a small amount of gas that runs very infrequently, but it's there to cover our needs when we need reliability. And all that balances together. But the other thing we think is essential to getting this done is to have a regional transmission organization in the West organizing all those resources. As I said, we're going to have more resource than we have load at certain times of the year. And so we'll have surplus renewables that can move east or west where they have greater value. Our neighbors are also going to be building surplus renewables. And if we don't have a large multi-state regional entity controlling that and coordinating that energy on the grid, we're going to have trouble meeting those energy goals.
Now, I assume then that transmission plays a very big role in this. And what impact will the Biden administration's infrastructure bill play in your plans?
There's a really critical piece there that the Department of Energy is looking at, which is money for building high voltage transmission. In particular, we're looking at high voltage transmission corridors that run east and west, most likely high voltage DC to cross the east grid, west grid boundary. So the North American grid has the Eastern Interconnect, Western Interconnect, and Texas being independent and separate from everybody else. But that Eastern and Western grid presents an incredible opportunity. Tri-State's members are on both sides, and Tri-State serves members on both sides. So we have an opportunity to work with the existing RTOs and expand their footprint into the West. Right now, the West does not have a single coordinated entity. We have 38 separate what are called balancing areas where each utility is making its own decisions on power supply and integration. And if we can get that down to fewer if you look at the entire Eastern Interconnect, there's 6 entities. And if we could get it down to something like that, we'd have a much more efficient system in the West.
Now, when during the technical briefing you and I attended, I think I asked you a question about the role that hydrogen would play in your system, and you responded pretty enthusiastically. So if you could tell us what the plans are for hydrogen.
Well, so it's part of our just transition for our formerly coal-dependent communities. If you think about Tri-State's already closed some coal in New Mexico and in Colorado, and typically the case in a rural community with a large coal plant that's been a big part of the economic driver for that community, the tax base, the jobs. And so when that goes away, that leaves a real void. And so one of the things we're doing to help fill that void is reinvesting in renewables in those communities. We have a large plant and a mine in Colorado that's going to be closing in phases in 2025 through 2029. And we're also going to reinvest in solar project there to help with some tax base. But ultimately, we want to preserve those jobs. And if you think about a journeyman welder, journeyman mechanic, millwright, a pipe fitter, those are the kind of jobs you have in a coal power plant. And we have people who are 2nd and 3rd generation coal miners. But what are we going to do to give them a job going into the future that they can continue to aspire to and use their skills? And it's not going to be training them to code. Okay, that's been one of, the popular. We'll take these folks and teach them how to write code, and then they're going to still have a job. But that's not the job they want. They want a job being a millwright and a pipe fitter, an electrician. And you look at high density, high volume energy storage technologies such as hydrogen or such as ammonia. They have that promise of being able to take that same workforce with the same kinds of skills. You're handling high pressure, high density energy, and that's very complementary to what we do in a coal plant today. And so that's why we're super enthusiastic about hydrogen. Is it's a way to, first of all, fill the reliability gap, because, and I'd love to talk to you some about Storm Uri, but we need storage for multiple days, not just multiple hours. And so hydrogen or ammonia, which is derivative of hydrogen, could be the solution to that and keep those jobs in the community.
So are we talking about storage underground? I know there's talk in Alberta about storing hydrogen in salt caverns. Is that the kind of storage you're talking about?
In our case, that wouldn't be the situation, since we don't have that kind of suitable geology. So it'd be above ground storage. When you think about hydrogen, it is hard to store large volumes of hydrogen. As you compress it to liquid hydrogen, you actually are better to convert it to ammonia. So if you imagine adding nitrogen to the hydrogen, you create ammonia. And a gallon, or if you want to say, of ammonia has more hydrogen molecules in it than liquefied hydrogen does. So it's a way of more efficiently storing that, and then you can ship it, you can put it on a pipeline, it can be used as a fuel. So it's really a very flexible form of energy, and another direction we'd like to see explored at Craig, Colorado, where we're closing a coal facility.
I do want to talk to you about Storm Uri in a moment, but first of all, what are you doing to plan for electric vehicles? Because I've talked to economic modelers, and they're telling me that by 2050, developed economies like US and Canada are going to need 2 to 3 times as much electricity as they're currently generating. Electric transportation is going to account for a lot of that. So what are your utilities doing to plan for EVs?
So we're actually involved in something we call the Beneficial Electrification League. We helped create this in Colorado, and we're expanding into the neighboring states in which we operate. And we have a number of key partners there, including ENGOs and state government offices. So we're promoting electric vehicle infrastructure and also other beneficial electric appliances, such as high efficiency, low temperature heat pumps. And as we work with them, we see that we have a special role, because rural electric utilities serve in some of the most remote and low density areas of the country. And yet you have to drive through those areas if you're going to get between urban centers. And for somebody to be willing to buy an electric vehicle, they have to have confidence that they're going to get where they're going without having to, stop for an overnight charge at somebody's garage. So we're very eager to help our members and are helping pay for electric vehicle charging stations in the rural areas, so that people don't have that range anxiety. They know they can get across the mountain pass and get to the other side. And that's a key part of our initiative there.
What about the distribution network in communities? There's a lot of concern that the old infrastructure that's in place simply won't handle the load that comes from everybody having an EV.
That's exactly true. There's going to be a lot of areas where it's not quite as easy as people think. Well, we'll just take that gas station and turn it into an electric charging station. There may not be sufficient transmission and distribution capacity to move that volume of electricity. It's really a lot of electricity if you think about replacing all those pumps with fast chargers. So I think we'll have to be strategic in the beginning, and that's the way we're looking at it now, finding places on the grid where we already have the capability of delivering and trying to exploit those as positions where you can put in charging. It's not necessarily going to be on every street corner.
Now, your comment about Storm Uri raises an issue of resilience. This is something that's been talked about a lot in the utility industry over the last few years. What's your take on that?
So let me start out that I've had 39 years in this business. It'll be 40 years in May. And that was the most frightening time for me in my career in terms of concern for the grid staying together. And Storm Uri brought such cold weather over such a large area, and it jeopardized natural gas supplies and other issues. Wind wasn't blowing. We had 300 or 400 megawatts of wind that we couldn't use because when it gets really, really cold, the wind stops blowing. And then you think about winter load patterns. People get up in the morning, they turn on their coffee maker, they're making breakfast, they're doing things, and the electrical load peaks early in the morning before the sun is even up. And so solar panels weren't an answer for us either. And during that basically 5-day period, we were relying on fossil fuels to keep the lights on, and in particular, coal, oil, and natural gas. And in fact, if it hadn't been for fuel oil, we would have experienced hundreds of millions of dollars of additional cost we were able to avoid because of the ability to switch to what's normally not a premium fuel oil, but at that point in time, it was cheaper than gas. So looking at Storm Uri, it really challenged the system and showed us that we need multiple days of storage. That's the reason when you asked earlier about the battery, we have a relatively small battery in our model that says that it'll be there to help us during certain brief peak periods, but the cost of a lithium ion storage battery grows as you make the size of the battery bigger. So right now, a utility can deploy a 2 or a 4-hour battery economically, and anything more than that becomes too costly. But we need, as I said, 4 or 5 days worth of storage. And so that would be unaffordable. That's the reason why we look at clean hydrogen or ammonia or other storage of the flow battery type technology, pump storage hydro. Those are all technologies that can get us that long-term, what we need to keep the grid together as we close down fossil fuels.
Duane, the final question. One of the things that strikes me, and we're not having this discussion in Canada quite yet, but I see that you are in the US, and that is the pace of technology change. I mean, we've talked about a lot of it just in this conversation around generation and storage and distribution and transmission. Have you ever seen anything like this? It's almost like the utility industry is being transformed by these new technologies.
Oh, it absolutely is. It's coming from our membership as well. And one of the great things about working for Electric Cooperative is I work for the members. I get to have a board meeting every month where a democratically elected representative from every one of those member systems, those 42 utilities, sits down in front of me and says, what are you doing to keep things reliable and affordable and advance a green energy transition? So, we're all about this, but it's what I would call light speed for a utility. And we do take a lot of criticism. Why can't you make this change faster? But if you think about the kind of assets we deploy that last for decades, typically, when we invest in a power plant, we expect that to run for 30 to 50 years. A transmission line, typically a life of 40 years, or even we have some lines that in New Mexico have 80 years old right now. So you're making long-term investments, and it's kind of hard to change all that within a decade. So I think we're moving at light speed. The technological advancements have allowed us to put in renewables at a cost lower than any fossil fuel. Right now, we're deploying this current block of wind and solar at a cost that's lower than anything we can burn. So it's helping to provide that great stability going forward as we have to absorb stranded investments and other resources.
Just to confirm one, that I think I recall you saying during the technical briefing that in your area, wind is now 1 cent a kilowatt hour and solar is below 2 cents a kilowatt hour. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, I think we have contracts, so I can't disclose the specific prices, but I can say that you can source wind in the neighborhood of 1 cent per kilowatt hour today, and you can source solar at something that's probably around 2 cents And that's a remarkable price if you think about it, to bring in clean energy. It's not dispatchable and you have to have some things to help it balance, but that is going to squeeze out fossil fuels and provide a cleaner resource for everyone at a cost that really stabilizes going forward. The typical contract we sign is for anywhere from 15 to 25 years on a renewable project at a fixed price for that entire period. So think about that at a period when we're seeing very high inflation, those costs aren't changing, and that helps stabilize everybody's electric bill.
I have to ask you one more question. From the utilities point of view, are they embracing renewables? I mean, they really see this as the next generation of power generation technology. They want the clean energy. They see that actually as being a way to lower costs over time.
I'll say not everybody, and you know, different state. A lot of this is driven by state policy right now because we don't have a clear federal policy with goals that have to be achieved. So in that absence, the individual states have been setting goals, and states have differing policies. So depending on where your utility is, you might be moving more ambitiously in one direction or another. We do serve Colorado amongst the 4 states. We serve New Mexico, which is also moving very quickly in terms of green energy. Wyoming has a different perspective and Nebraska has a different perspective. The one thing they all agree on is reliability and affordability. And if we can make that happen and get cleaner energy, which is what we're showing can be done, then everybody can come to agreement.
Duane, thank you for your insights. Really appreciate this.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.